Hi, guys. Welcome back. Today we're going to visit with Gregory from Life After Losing, and Gregory's going to describe how he lost 200 pounds and gained confidence. I hope you enjoy.
Weight loss wasn't a straightforward path for me, and in fact, it was anything but straightforward. It was more like a labyrinth of failed attempts, a maze of unkept promises to myself that was filled with quick fixes, fad diets, and so on, leaving me stuck in a cycle of hope and then despair. And the journey to a healthier self began with the recognition that my relationship with food was a lot more complex than even I ever thought. And it was also intertwined with layers of emotions and coping mechanisms. As a child, grappling with the realization that I was gay brought a torrent of emotions, feelings of inferiority, self-hate. To put this into perspective, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s where being gay was not something you wanted to be. The media portrayal of gay people during that time was awful. So I grew up literally thinking that I was doomed to death because something that I had no control over. In the hallways of school, I faced this thing of bullying, not as much for being gay because I didn't necessarily present as gay. I was mostly bullied for being the fat kid. So yeah, school was never really fun for me. And it was also very lonely. As the fat gay choir kid with acne was really not the one that anybody wanted to hang out with. In those moments, food became a sanctuary. Growing up in a household where my parents were young themselves, they navigated their own challenges, and I lacked the guidance to navigate the complexities of my emotions. Honestly, they were great parents and were very loving and accepting, but I would never discuss anything with them. I was afraid, and I didn't want to disappoint anyone, and so I just kept everything inside.
It's interesting because I'm closer to Gregory's age than people that are in their 20s age. And what he says is really true. When we were younger, there was a lot more internalizing. And I think with social media and TikTok, I think we've given kind of a microphone and an outlet for young people to let the world know how they feel. And so now, fast forward, and all of a sudden, Gregory's in a spot where, thanks to YouTube and thanks to his channel, we're able to kind of get a glimpse into what he went through. Because when he was younger, you couldn't just necessarily come out of the closet without having to deal with even more bullying than he was already going through.
Food became a silent confidant, an escape from the turbulence that was going on within me. Much like you, I went through periods of losing weight and then would gain it all right back. I spent years working out and trying to lose weight only to get disappointed with how slow my progress was. At this time, I was in my 20s and could only get myself to maintain 300 pounds. Actually, at one point, I decided to starve myself and got down to 293 pounds. And that lasted about a week. And then I bounced back up to 305 to 307. And that's pretty much where it stayed. And at this point, so I just gave up.
Now, I don't want to be insensitive here, but I want your guys' opinion down in the comments. Earlier, when I say earlier, it was a couple weeks back, I was describing how when I was younger, at least, I felt like guys had it easier if they're overweight, even to this day, than women do. And the reason I say that is because when you look at Greg here, and apparently he was in the 290s or 300 range right here. I don't look at a guy and think that guy is fat. I look at a guy and I think that guy looks like a football player. So let me know if I'm being insensitive or if what I'm saying has a little bit of truth to it, that it is easier for guys to kind of be a teddy bear type, offensive lineman type, where with women, not so much.
But life then took a turn when my mother passed away at 52, leaving behind, a void. And within that same year span, I also lost both of my grandparents 10 months earlier, actually. It was goodbye to Christmases, goodbye to family get togethers, and all of the other things that I grew up with. I was 31 at that time, so I clung even tighter to my coping mechanism. The very food that had been both a friend and a foe became against the pain, like a way to fill the emptiness left by their absence. For a lot of us, weight loss can become a sporadic dance through the years. A few more failed weight loss attempts occurred after her passing, but nothing ever stuck. But when the scale finally crossed over that 400-pound mark, I had a an awakening of sorts. There was a moment of reckoning. The reflection in the mirror was not lying to me. The scale wasn't lying. I had to finally admit to myself that the path that I was on and the one that I was always used to, it led me to an uncomfortable and unwanted destination. Seeking counseling became my lifeline of sorts, and it was the first step towards unraveling the intricate web that I had woven for myself. Therapy was a place where I was able to unearth the tangled emotions and comprehend why food had been my refuge. It was the cornerstone of understanding the intricate connection between my emotional well-being and my relationship with food. The decision to have bariatric surgery wasn't merely a physical choice, but a significant milestone. Undergoing gastric bypass surgery in 2017 marked a profound shift for me. It was a commitment to rewrite my relationship with food and reclaim my life. It wasn't about taking the easy way out. It was about acknowledging the complexity of my struggles and then embracing something that could assist me on this challenging path.
Earlier he said that his grandparents had passed away and that his mom had passed away. I think he said at age 51, or she looked very, very pretty, very, very young. And that's such a tough deal when all of a sudden you're used to things like Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays and birthday get-togethers, and all of a sudden there's not very many family members left to do those special things with. And I think he wanted a little bit of a restart, right? And so he decides to go through the surgery. And I think we can all agree, Gregory, you look great. So, with that being said, guys, grab your socks and shoes. We're about to go for a walk.
Over the course of 2 years, 190 pounds melted away. A physical transformation paralleled by an emotional renaissance as well. Yet the real triumph wasn't just shedding the weight. It was understanding why I carried it for so long. It was about learning that true change goes beyond the physical. It delves into the roots of our struggles, untangling emotional baggage that binds us and holds us back. 7 years have passed and I stand 180 pounds lighter. A testament to resilience, perseverance, and a journey marked not just by numbers on a scale, but by the immeasurable growth from within. The journey wasn't linear at all. It was filled with a series of highs and lows, victories and setbacks, each contributing to the person that I have eventually became.
I'm going to link Gregory's channel down below. Once again, it's called Life After Losing. His channel gives great tips. It talks about he and his partner, and I just think it's inspirational. About a week or two ago, he had left a comment on one of my videos, and I had gotten a chance to take a look at some of his videos just earlier that week, and he didn't know about it. So when he left a comment on my video, I was able to let him know, hey, I want to tell people about your channel. And he said, you've got the green light, go for it. So I want you guys to know that I think his channel is a great place to go for inspiration. If you're looking for a little inspiration right now and you went and got your socks and shoes on, great, let's go for a walk. Well, happy and good morning, Venters. I hope you're having a nice Sunday. Is Sunday the first day of the week or the last day of the weekend? Guys, today we're going to take a little field trip to Jeff's house. Jeff was my best friend in fifth grade. But after fifth grade, my mom, who we were living with my grandma, she all of a sudden got this urge to move out to a city called Mesa, Arizona. So in sixth grade, instead of me hanging out and being with my buddies that I had grown up with my whole life,
for the first time in my life, I had experienced, moving. And it was really tough and it was really scary. And one of the things I remember my first day of school in Mesa was I was walking to school. Even in Mesa, I walked to school. And all of a sudden, you start to see the kids in the playground of this new school. I went to a school called Adams Elementary in Mesa, Arizona. And in Mesa, Arizona, when I went to this new school, the first thing I thought was, what's in the water and what are they feeding these kids? And all of a sudden, instead of being one of the bigger kids here for 5th grade, I was considered one of the smaller kids there for 6th grade. I mean, it was real eye-opening. And now as an adult, when I think back to it, it was probably simply puberty. We were probably having some kids in Mesa that in 6th grade were going through puberty, becoming, bigger teenagers, so to speak, whereas I was probably not quite there yet. So I was still stuck in like my 5th grade body. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden you go from being one of the bigger kids, right, where you're dominating sports on the playground, so to speak, and all of a sudden you're kind of not so dominant at sports. So I dropped from maybe one of the top 2 or 3 athletes at my grade school to probably out of the top 10 at my new grade school, right? And I just thought that was really interesting. But because this is not about Mesa, let's stick to my last grade here, which was 5th grade. When I was in 5th grade, one of my best friends was a guy named Jeff. And he lives at the corner here where we're going today. So what we're doing is we're taking a little bit of a different route. And I think I've walked this route with you guys once or twice, a couple months back, but I haven't walked it recently. What's interesting about my buddy's house that I remember visiting almost every other day when I was a kid during 5th grade is that now it's at the corner where there's a main street going by, and then of course his house is along the north-south route, right? And what's amazing is that right across the street from his house there's a bus stop. And this bus stop was one of these places where we ignored it growing up because we didn't really take the bus anywhere. But what's amazing about this bus stop is that forever it was always a place where you could pick up the bus, right? And we didn't see it as anything more than that. But now it's become like the permanent bed of homeless people, which is kind of interesting. And when I say permanent bed, there's 1 or 2 people in particular that when I drive my car or when I walk by, it seems like they're always there. And it's just really interesting because my childhood memory that I have just stuck in my head is one where my neighborhood didn't have homeless people. We didn't have a bunch of people walking around with backpacks and, looking like they were disheveled and stuff. We didn't have that stuff. And me and Jeff used to do these things where we would spend the night at each other's houses, wait till our parents and family members had fallen asleep, and then we would sneak out of the house and walk around the neighborhood. And when I say sneak around the house or sneak out of the house and walk around the neighborhood, I'm talking we would be out at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, just walking around the neighborhood because it was such a good neighborhood. It was so quiet. You never had to worry about anyone or anything bothering you. And you never saw police either because it was just a part of town where there wasn't really a need for a huge police presence. And that's the one thing that kind of gets me is now I feel like we need a little bit of a police presence because all of these, people that are constantly walking through alleyways, looking into people's backyards, and some of them look like they're permanently up to no good, But now where I feel like we could use a little police presence, we still don't really get that police presence. I'm not necessarily freaked out about that because, it's not like one of those situations where, people are constantly getting mugged or anything crazy. So we're gonna walk to his house. It's a real pretty baby blue color now, but I don't even remember the color that it was when we were growing up. I'm sure it was just a regular old brown house or gray house, but I can't quite put my finger on what color his house was. But anyway, let me tell you about my buddy Jeff. Jeff was the absolute best friend that a 10 or 11-year-old fifth grader could ever ask for. You know, sometimes when your buddy's with you and you want to do something fun, Jeff was the type of guy that would do something fun. You'd see a girl walking and you'd say, "Hey Jeff, go grab that girl's hand like you're her boyfriend and just start walking with her in the store." Stuff that no kid in their right mind would ever do. And all of a sudden my buddy Jeff would go and grab this stranger girl's hand and just start walking in the store. And of course the girl would pull her hand away like, "Who the heck are you?" And we never met anything horrible about it. It was just kind of something fun we would do to make ourselves laugh. So he was the absolute best friend a fifth grader could have. Here's that bus stop where I told you there's people that are just constantly sleeping on it. Right now we found it in a time where it's idle. So here is the corner where the main traffic goes. This baby blue house here where they have the offset garage. Guys, that was my best buddy Jeff's house. And for the whole year of the fifth grade, me and my buddy Jeff would hang out there, or we would hang out at my grandmother's house. But we were true best friends where there wasn't one single day that we didn't hang out together, right? And he was kind of considered one of the nerdy kids in school, where I was kind of considered one of the popular kids in school. So it was a situation where he felt like by being my friend, it raised his status a little bit, right? And at the same time, I felt by being his friend that I had found just the coolest kid in the world to hang out with. And Jeff was truly a little kid's best friend. What happened is after fifth grade, I moved to Mesa, right? Went to sixth grade out there, and I kind of maintained a friendship with Jeff. I even had a couple weekends where me and my mom would come down on a Friday after school, pick up Jeff, go back to Mesa, and then, you know, spend the night Friday and Saturday night together. And then my mom and I would drive back here and drop him off Sunday so he could go to school with his family, you know, here at Acacia, because he hadn't moved with us, obviously. And what was really weird is in sixth grade and seventh grade, which is only 2 years, I started to develop a lot of friendships in Mesa, obviously, because that's where I went for school at the time. When I moved back in eighth grade, right? When I moved back in eighth grade, something had changed. During that time period, Jeff had become friends, obviously, with other kids and stuff. And we had kind of lost touch. So all of a sudden, I'm back, right? We're still friends. I remember he and me walked together to the first day of eighth grade, right? But from that point forward, it wasn't like it was in fifth grade. It was like we were never quite as close. So we started to develop this rift. Then in freshman year, we had that same situation where, you know, in freshman year, you're no longer in elementary where you're in one particular classroom the whole of the day. You're now in a situation where every single hour you're going to different classes, right? Different class periods. And what happened is me and Jeff didn't have any classes together in eighth grade. And then freshman year of high school, we didn't have a single class together either. So what happens is you naturally start to befriend people that you have classes with. So all of a sudden, I became best friends with Chris. And because I was best friends with Chris and because me and Jeff Calloway had kind of grown apart, we still lived in the same neighborhood. We just didn't really communicate very much. After freshman year, Jeff and his family moved from Phoenix, Arizona. They moved out to North Carolina. And, I have never gone further east than Oklahoma and Illinois, right? So I have no experience out on the East Coast. But all of a sudden, Jeff went from, Phoenix, Arizona to North Carolina. And he moved and he never moved back, right? So he's been out there ever since. But something happened a handful of years ago where I was married and I was living at 59th Avenue and Cactus in this place called Marshall Ranch. And all of a sudden I get a phone call from Jeff out of the blue. And he had gotten my number some way, somehow, and we had gotten in touch. I don't remember if it was through Facebook or if it was something where he had just remembered my phone number at my mom's house, but somehow, some way, we got reconnected. And he and his wife and his 2 children came down and they stayed with us for like 2 or 3 days. And it was really, really cool because it was just like, hey, this was my best friend from 5th grade. Now he and his family are hanging out with me for a couple days. And he seemed really, really normal, right? And so after those couple of days, he ends up going back with his family to North Carolina and we're good. A handful of years later, in 2011 or 2012, I joined Facebook for the first time, okay? To give you an idea of when he visited and stayed with in my house with his family and my family together, right? To give you an idea, that was in like 2006 or 2007. So we're talking quite a few years back. It wasn't until 2011 or 12, I believe, where I finally jumped on Facebook and started reconnecting with classmates and stuff, right? And one of the first people that I reconnected with was Jeff. So he and I send each other a friend request, right? And we become friends and we start chatting, but it's not like friendship chatting. It's like, hey, how are you? And we would just say hi to each other and then go about our days, right? It wasn't like a phone call or anything. It was just a couple of messages via Facebook. And then somewhere over the last 10, 15 years, Jeff lost his mind. And I mean literally, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, lost his mind. And that happens to some people. If you guys have an experience where maybe you had a friend from childhood that has kind of got mental illness issues, and you can't really have a conversation with them, or at least not the same degree of conversation that you did before the mental illness issues, let us know down in the comments. Because in addition to friends that had mental health issues, I've also had family members that had mental health issues. My Uncle David was diagnosed and suffered from schizophrenia for a great portion of his life, right? But he took medications, so he had many, many years where it was very, very normal with Uncle David. But when he was off his medicine, oh my goodness, you could not communicate with a guy like that without getting weirded out. Because if you've ever had a conversation with somebody that's not all there, it's kind of a creepy conversation. Because you're literally feeling like you're communicating with somebody that's, I don't know how you would describe it, part zombie or like a bug that's had its antenna ripped off. You literally feel like you're talking with somebody. God, I hate to say it, but in his case, when you would talk to Jeff or my Uncle David, you kind of felt like you were talking to a demon when they were either on drugs or not on their medications. With Jeff's case, he was doing some hardcore drugs. With my Uncle David's case, he would be off his medicine. But either way, guys, you would get this same eerie result. With both of them, you're talking to somebody that you just don't really feel comfortable talking with. Anyway, he got to the point where when Messenger came out, because if you remember, we had Facebook, and then I think shortly thereafter, they came out with a connected Messenger system to Facebook, where people could call you even if you didn't give them their phone numbers. And I think we're used to it now, but at the first time when people started calling me, who I didn't give my phone number to, it kind of weirded me out, right? So all of a sudden, this guy, I say this guy because we're not talking about a 10-year-old 5th grade best friend. We're now talking about a 35, 40-year-old man with emotional disturbance issues, right? And so all of a sudden, he's calling me at 2 or 3 in the morning, which is already a red flag for crazy, right? Somebody's calling you at 2 or 3 in the morning, and if you don't answer, they keep calling until you do pick up. That's a little bit of craziness, right? Give me a side of craziness, right? With water, please. And so one day I picked up the phone, and it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's a little freaky. But I remember my buddy Jeff goes, "Jesse, this is Jeff. Why aren't you picking up the phone?" "Well, it's 3 in the morning, Jeff, and I have to work in a couple of hours, you know. Why are you calling nonstop?" He goes, "Jesse, do you believe in Jesus Christ?" And of course, I'm half asleep, but I'm like, "Yes, Jeff, I do." And he goes, "Well, I want you to know that I've devoted my life to Satan, and I'm one of his power disciples, and I consider you to be my eternal enemy," right? And I know that sounds a little hardcore, but you got to remember, I'm half asleep. This is my buddy from 5th grade that was always goofy, right? And so, as funny as it sounds, I'm more giggling and chuckling, thinking this is the goofiest sounding thing I've ever heard. And I go, "Okay, Jeff, good night," and I hung up the phone, and he proceeded to call back over the next 2 or 3 weeks, like every 5 or 10 minutes, to the point where I had to basically block his number. So all of a sudden, he's not able to call me on Messenger, and every time he did call me, it's these rantings and ravings from Satan's army. So it wasn't exactly somebody I wanted to speak with. And again, if you guys know anybody with mental health issues or with schizophrenia or manic depressive or bipolar, these are things that can push people to say and do things that they probably wouldn't normally do in the right state of mind. And so what happened is he couldn't call me, and all of a sudden, every single time I put a post on Facebook, he's sitting there making some weird comment of, you know, "Why won't you answer the phone? Why won't you pick up, old friend?" And he's saying a lot of menacing things. Now keep in mind, it's not like I'm 45 and I'm talking to some 25-year-old muscle-bound stud that wants to destroy and beat me up or anything. Jeff Calloway's not that type of guy. He's just a little human being like I am, right? Nothing major or scary about him. But he's talking just like a crazy person. And so all of a sudden, you know, I have to kind of ask myself, is my best buddy from 5th grade my eternal best friend? Well, yeah, I suppose in one sense he is. You know, I will always remember my buddy as my 10 or 11-year-old best friend self, right? Like, I will always see him as that perfect friend to have as a 10 or 11-year-old. But at the same time, I don't think that means that I have to be his buddy through thick and thin for the rest of our lives, especially when nothing positive comes out of it. If you want to take your medicine, you want to change your life for the better, right? Then take your medicine and I'll be there for you. You're my buddy. But if your idea of taking your medicine is never taking your medicine and being a nuisance and somebody that's just creepy to hang out with, you know, I'm not down for that. And I would recommend that for anybody. I don't care if somebody is your best friend from when you were 5 or 10 years old. You're 50 years old now. You don't need friends that are going to be calling at 2 or 3 in the morning talking bizarre. That's not good for your mental health, you know? So again, there might be some people that disagree and, hey, I would never throw away a friend. Well, you know, we're not talking about a friend that I had spent every day of my life with. We're talking, he was my 5th grade friend. And although I've known him ever since 5th grade, I don't really know the guy. I know the kid, you know? But anyway, I like to pray for Jeff, and I think about Jeff often, because it really would be cool if I had somebody in my life like a best buddy that I could reach out to. When I was even younger than Jeff, one of my best buddies in like 3rd and 4th grade was Jason Hensley, who's no longer alive. And what's really interesting is, as an adult, before he passed away, I was starting to reach out to him, and I was actually debating whether to take a train up to Idaho, where he was living, to visit him. And unfortunately, he passed away. So it's really, really weird. It feels like my childhood and my past, it feels like it's a page of a book that's being torn out of a book, you know? So it's like I don't really have old friends that I could turn to. So Jason was my best friend in like 4th grade. So maybe the year before Jeff was. And it wasn't like Jason did something to irritate me that made me Jeff's best friend. No, it wasn't that at all. What happened was, in 5th grade, I became best friends with Jeff because in 5th grade, Jason and his family moved from this house across the street, and he started going to another school. So still loved the kid to death, really, really good friend, really, really a best friend type, but he wasn't there anymore, right? I didn't have a car, and even though he lived across the street, I wasn't used to crossing the street and hanging out with him. But in case you're wondering, I did spend the night at his house, and he did spend the night at my house continuously after those moves. He just went to another school, so I didn't have that daily interaction with him, right? So all of a sudden in 4th grade, Jason is replaced by Jeff. All of a sudden, I move, right? Different friends move. That's the scary thing about these neighborhoods that I walk. There's a lot of ghosts for me. You know, even though I'm 47 now, I can still remember walking these streets as a 8, 9, 10-year-old boy and having friends all along the streets. As a matter of fact, these very houses that we walk by, I have friends that grew up living in these homes. So I'm sure that, like this home right here, for example, you know, I don't know if I had a friend that lived here, but I'd be willing to bet that at one point or another, there were classmates of mine that lived in these very homes, in this very home, you know? And it's just kind of scary to me how the years fly by and how you lose touch with people. Sometimes you lose touch with people that don't want to lose touch with you, like crazy Jeff. And sometimes you lose touch with people like Jason, not because you want to lose touch with them, but because, you know, they pass away and you don't get a chance to connect with them anymore. Now, the good thing with Jason is I was really good, borderline best friends with his brother Trevor as well. And Trevor is on one of my Facebook friends. And I love the guy to death, so I'm contemplating asking him if he wants to join the Walk, Talk, Vent Facebook group. But the weird thing about that is I want the Facebook group to be for venters that walk, and I just don't know if Trevor is the walking type. He's the type that if he has a couple hours to himself, he's going to head off and do some fishing. He loves fishing, right? So anyway, where am I going with this? Well, pretty soon, my buddy Jason, who I guess never owned a home, he must have rented homes with his family, right? So he moves in 5th grade across the street. And then after that, I moved to Mesa. He ends up moving with his family out to Nevada. So we have this situation where when I move back to Phoenix for the 8th grade, I've got Jeff Calloway still in my life, but now he's not really a best friend anymore. He's just my best friend from 5th grade, right? And all of a sudden, we're moving on to junior high. Now, junior high was pretty uneventful, and although I was still hanging out with Jeff Calloway, it wasn't like 5th grade where you're spending the night at each other's houses each weekend. Morning, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. It's a little warm. Stay cool. Have a good day. You know, it's weird because it's not like I have a set story with chapters and stuff. So it's not like I have a story prepared to tell you. I'm just kind of rambling on. But the point is when you move and when friends are moved, it's real easy to lose contact, you know? And it's kind of sad because sometimes you have a situation where you want to have contact with them. Like, you know, Jeff wants to have contact with me. but because he doesn't want to take his medication, it's just not very fun or enjoyable for me to have contact with him. And because I want to have contact with Jason but can't, I kind of know what Jeff is going through. My best friend in high school was Chris. When a best friend decides not to be your best man in your wedding, and when your best friend kind of purposely moves away from you, there's not much that you can do about that. Now, Chris is my Facebook friend as well. And there's pieces of me that would love to reconnect with him, as adults, but there's something that Chris did in my life that's kind of bad that I didn't tell you guys before, but I'm going to share it with you now. And Chris, if you ever get a hold of my channel and you're watching this, maybe you can explain this to me, but there's something you did that was kind of horrible to me, and I've never told anybody in the world this, so I'm telling you guys now. When I was 18 and had graduated from high school, I started going out with my girlfriend slash fiance. Her name was Angie. Angie ended up becoming the mother of my first child, my daughter, Taylor, okay? After about a year and a half, when Taylor was very, very young, I got a phone call from Angie while I was at my buddy Jesse's house. Yeah, 2 Jessies hanging out, right? So I was at my buddy Jesse O's house. His last name wasn't O, that was just his initial, right? But I was at Jesse O's house, and all of a sudden I get a phone call, and it's her, and she's like, you know what? I just want to let you know that I've thought about it a long time, and basically she broke up with me. And it really came out of the blue. I remember I was just kind of stunned, speechless, and silent for like a good 10-15 minutes, and my buddy Jesse's like, dude, what's going on? And I go, Angie just broke up with me. Now keep in mind, this wasn't a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. This was an engagement, and we had a child together. And I wish I could tell you that from that point on, it was just a regular little fight and we got back together. But for whatever reason, we were never the same at that point. And we pretty much broke up. Not because I wanted to, but all of a sudden, I'm an 18-year-old kid, and all of a sudden I'm looking at 18 years of child support payments. And all of a sudden, instead of going to college, which I was already going to college, I was going to Paradise Valley Community College. And all of a sudden it's, you need to come and pick up our daughter, I'm done. And she even was talking about giving up our daughter for adoption. And I'm like, how can you give up a child that we've already been raising? You know what I mean? It was just this really world's worst phone call that you could receive. Because it wasn't just a, hey, I want to break up with you, I'm your girlfriend, and that's what girlfriends and boyfriends do. It was, hey, we're over, and I don't want our child anymore. Those are really tough things to hear when you're 18. And then when you're 18 and you're depressed because you just hear some things, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm going to be 18, and the first thing I'm going to know as an adult is 18 straight years of child support and having my daughter whenever the courts say I have my daughter. And so all of a sudden I'm living not at home. I was one of these 18-year-olds that I wanted my apartment. So my whole senior year of high school, guys, I had my own apartment. I mean, not many people experience that, you know? But I had a pretty decent job where I was kind of a manager at a place. And I had my own apartment, and she lived with me for a while, right? And we had a situation where, for whatever reason, we had a little bit of an argument, and she went to her family's for the weekend. I get this phone call the next couple of days with my buddy, and all of a sudden my future is wrecked. And again, I'm sorry if I'm babbling here, but these are the memories that I have from 30 years ago when this is happening in my life. And these are things that led me, an unfortunate series of events, right? That is the perfect title for a book, right? Because that's kind of the best title that I would put it on my life. All of a sudden, I'm this guy in turmoil. I don't have friends that are consistent. I have a fiance that's breaking up with me. I have a future where instead of going to college and graduating and being this, that, and the other, all of a sudden I have to kind of figure out what I'm going to do with myself. I have this really good paying job. I guess I'll maybe drop out of college for a while and take care of my daughter, because my fiance all of a sudden doesn't want to be a wife. She doesn't want to be a mom. She doesn't want to be with me. So all of a sudden you're instantly depressed. And I found myself being a single parent. And guess who saved me? Not my best friend, Chris. I'll get back to him in a second. My angel was my grandmother, Carmen. She actually took a couple days out of her life and came to stay with me at my apartment a couple streets down. And I had forgotten about that. And then the other day I was thinking about my beautiful grandma, and I just remembered, my God, my grandma was my true best friend, not anybody else. So grandma didn't stay with me forever, but she stayed with me for a couple days just so I could get kind of used to being with my daughter alone, because, you know, when babies are babies, there's diapers that need to be changed constantly, there's crying and fidgeting, right? And you just got to get used to talking with babies. And here I was, this 18, 19-year-old kid, and all of a sudden I'm a single parent. It was just really, really off-putting, really bizarre. And my grandmother had her house and her life to live, so she couldn't live with me in this apartment forever, right? So she slowly but surely goes back to her home, still there at the edge of a phone call, right, if I needed her, right? But instead I reached out to my best friend all throughout high school, Chris Rademacher. And I said, Chris, is there any way you could come and stay with me? Because Angie broke up with me, and he knew this, right? We were still seeing each other daily, and we worked together and stuff. And so he agreed to kind of move out of his home and become my official roommate, you know, taking over Angie's spot because she moved back in with her mom, left the baby behind with me. I mean, it's just really bizarre, guys. There were no 18-year-old single dads back then. And as you guys know, I only saw my daughter on certain days later, so you know that I wasn't a single father forever. There were some really trying, challenging moments. But anyway, I have to tell you the story of what happened with Chris. And Chris, you deserve to know this in case you're listening, which I don't think you are. But who knows, in the future, someday you might get a hold of this channel and binge everything, and you will eventually find this video and listen to it. I had a situation where my daughter was sleeping in her crib, and I said, Chris, I'm going to run to the store real quick. Is it okay if I leave Taylor here? She's sleeping in the crib, and if she gets up, just give her one of the bottles that's made in the fridge, right? No big deal. I'll be back in 15. He says, sure, no problem. So I leave and I come back, and as I'm coming back, I can literally hear crying through the door. So I open up the door, right, and she's crying in her bed, and all of a sudden I hear, now keep in mind, you're walking in the door, you're walking through your hallway area back to the room where you hear this crying, and all of a sudden I hear Chris scream at the top of his lung, "Shut up!" And keep in mind, he's not talking to an adult, he's not talking to someone on the phone. He's screaming at my daughter, my baby daughter, assuming that I'm gone and I can't hear what he's doing. And I instantly got in a fight with him, and we were literally close to throwing blows, and I go, you better get the F out of here, and I don't want to ever see you again, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I don't know how, but somehow we smoothed things out, but from that point forward, there was a rift in our friendship. And I think he felt really guilty about it, because I think he knew that what he did was really, really bizarre, because in my mind, I'm thinking, what the heck did he do? Did he do something to my daughter that caused her to start crying? Or, like most babies, did she just start crying, and instead of coddling her, picking her up, helping her, he was yelling at her? And it was one of the creepiest things ever. It's one of those things where I honestly feel like if I would have been gone for any bit longer, you know, something would have happened to my daughter. It was that bad of a vibe that I got. And when I looked at her, she didn't have any noticeable damage. I don't think he did anything to her physically. I think it was just a situation where he thought I wasn't there. And I think he was just frustrated at my daughter, my little baby girl, in a crying fit. And you know how babies can be. They can cry nonstop for a good 10, 15 minutes, right? And so I, to this day, don't know 100% what happened. Now, don't get me wrong, Chris wasn't the type, I don't think, to do anything to my daughter physically. But you never know what sticks in people's heads. And what I mean by that is, does a little 6, 7, 8-month-old baby, and I'm talking, that's how young my daughter was. She was like a year or less. Do babies like that remember traumas like that? Is there a piece of her subconscious that is going to remember this grown-ass man yelling at her at the tender age of 7, 8, 9 months old? And so there was a real rift there. But some way, somehow, through the years, he had apologized, and we had kind of smoothed that over. Because if you remember, guys, a couple years later, I had met my wife, Liz, and I asked Chris to be my best man. And it was shortly thereafter where he came back and said, you know what, I don't want to be your best man. That's where I started to notice as an adult that things change and that your world can go from one world to another just like that. So guys, your boy, when I was 17 or 18, I was on track to take over the world and have just the best wife, the best buddies, and the best future, along with the best grandma in the history of the earth. And all of a sudden, everything was turned upside down. And we will continue this story tomorrow. I hope you guys have a beautiful day. I hope I didn't bore you. I hope I didn't ramble, but I know I did. But I think we all have stories like this that are just complicated. They're intricated. Why aren't you friends with this person anymore, Becky? Because this person did such and such to me. What did they do? I can't even put words to it. We all have situations like this. It's what makes up the framework of our life. Have a beautiful day. I'll see you tomorrow.